is gorgeous for us.
It is.
But this is a little concerning.
It is, yeah. In fact, the wind has strengthened just a bit from 115 miles per hour to 120, which it doesn't sound like a huge jump, but it's been doing that. So that's been the trend. So that's the concern now, is it's now a Category 3 major hurricane, and it's making its way along that westward progression. And of course, it's only a matter of time before it hits land. And of course, this is the Leeward Islands that are under a hurricane warning. They're going to be first to be hit. We also have Puerto Rico, though, and portions of the Virgin Islands under a hurricane watch. Here's a look at the track. So as we continue into the forecast tomorrow, likely Irma is going to strengthen to a Category 4 strength, and that's likely where it's going to stay as it makes landfall for the Leeward Islands and also moving toward Puerto Rico as well. That is something that's expected as we approach Wednesday. From Wednesday onward, you can see it continues along that westward track, affecting areas like the Dominican Republic, Turks and Caicos, moving out toward Cuba. And what's next? Florida. And that is something that's expected as we move into the weekend, into the start of next week. The question is, where does it go from there? Because a lot of the models are converging on the fact that it will likely follow this progression westward, moving right toward Cuba and eventually out toward Florida. But from there, notice how it's now following a very southerly track and moving right up through Florida. So that means if it does move up the East Coast, likely though, it's going to make landfall near Florida and then make its way northward. Some better news for us locally, meaning that it will likely weaken by the time it gets to us. Outside of Irma, we have several other areas we're watching in the tropics. We have one area of disturbance that has a 40% chance of formation. You can see how it's starting to circulate as we move out toward the Gulf of Mexico. And then also just east of Irma, yet another disturbance starting to churn. So trop is looking very active. Meanwhile, here locally, not quite as active today, although we do have a gusty breeze in place. High pressure has settled in, so that's keeping us dry and it's also keeping us clear, but that won't be the case for long. Tomorrow night, we have the next front moving into the area. You could see these storms that are tracking along through Canada. That's going to dip southward into the forecast tomorrow and bring a slight chance of severe weather, mainly as you move inland. So as we move out toward Albany, moving into western Massachusetts and even portions of Vermont and New Hampshire, that's where that best chance of severe weather lies, and the main concern would be damaging gusty winds. So as we move through the forecast tonight, we're in the clear. We do have a few clouds moving into the forecast tomorrow, but the storm threat stays well to our north and west through the forecast tomorrow afternoon. Then tomorrow night, it starts to shift eastward, and it's mainly after 9 o'clock that the concern moves in locally. So your 7-day forecast includes those showers tracking through. Now that rain will be locked in place for much of the forecast, not only tomorrow night, but Wednesday and Thursday as well. So there is a slight concern for some flooding in areas with that persistent rainfall in place. And of course, because of that rainfall, temperatures are going to drop. So we go from the low to mid 80s today and tomorrow down to the 70s by the end of the week. We'll say at this point, a lot of the models are converging on it actually making landfall closer to Florida and staying that way. So as far as folks that were impacted by Harvey, that is some very good news. But for Florida, of course, this is going to have some direct impacts with this track that it is projected to follow. Right now, Category 4 with 130-mile-per-hour winds, looking to make landfall as we move toward the Leeward Islands by tomorrow evening, continuing to follow that westward track over a very warm Atlantic Ocean. So it is not looking to weaken at any point, likely holding on to that Category 4 strength as it eventually moves toward Florida as we move into the weekend. So there is some questions about what will happen next, because a lot of the models are now saying that it will likely make landfall toward Florida as we move into the late portion of the weekend, mainly because the high pressure that's in place over the ocean is very strong. So that keeps that westward motion in place. The question is, how will this jet stream interact with what it will do next after hitting Florida? A lot of models now suggesting that it will likely be able to move northward and inland, which you can see now with our spaghetti plots. A lot of the models now pushing it kind of north and westward, and that's because that jet stream is expected to shift north. But if things were to change, and they can because it is so far out, we could see that trying to track eastward. So we're keeping an eye on that track. At this point, there is more confidence in the fact that it will likely move toward Florida. Storms are converging just to our north and west. This is something we're watching for tomorrow evening here locally. So here's a look at the timing of that, because initially you're heading out tomorrow morning and it's a beautiful, mostly sunny sky. Hard to believe there's the storms heading our way, and it will take their time getting here. In fact, even through tomorrow evening around this time, those storms mainly just impacting areas far west. That's where the main storm threat is going to lie. There's a slight risk of severe weather in far western Massachusetts, also extending through western portions of New Hampshire, Vermont, and extending into upstate New York. That's where the strongest risk will lie, and it's mainly after 9 o'clock tomorrow night. After that point, it starts to push eastward, pushing east of 495. But because it's so late in the evening, it will start to lose its strength, although still some heavy downpours expected as we head into Wednesday morning. That will likely linger for much of the day on Wednesday and right on into Thursday as well. But it's dry and quiet out there tonight. Temperatures sitting in the 60s for this evening. Tomorrow, looking to top out in the mid to upper 80s, a hot one as that humidity looks to build in the area. Showers move on through for Wednesday into Thursday. After they track through the area, we do see a bit of a cool down heading into Friday and the weekend as temperatures look to fall into the lower 70s, just a tad below average for this time of year. But the good news is that sunshine will start to return. For WCVB, I'm meteorologist Kellyanne Cicalese. Yeah, another day of really nice warmth and humidity building in our area, kind of summer-like for tomorrow. But of course, it is going to get more active for us locally as we move into the middle of the work week with our next round of showers. We're also watching Hurricane Irma, which is strengthening still. Jumped about 10 miles per hour. It's at about 140 miles per hour now, its strength. So it is continuing to strengthen, and it's no surprise because there's really no interruptions for it. There's some very warm water down here in the Atlantic, so that's helping to strengthen the system. And even as it approaches landfall, making its way toward the northern Leeward Islands as we head into tomorrow evening, it's still holding on to its strength as it continues to push westward. It's moving toward Puerto Rico as we move into Wednesday evening. Turks and Caicos also looking to be impacted as we move toward Friday. And you can see with this cone of uncertainty, it does include the southern tip of Florida, Miami in particular, looking to likely see impacts as we move into the weekend. Of course, there is some uncertainty within that cone. However, a lot of the models are converging on the fact that as we approach to the weekend, it will move toward Florida. The question is, where will it go after that point? And you can see that the models converge or diverge a little bit at that point as we move into the late portion of the weekend, into the start of next week. There's two models in particular that we do watch, though. There's the GFS and the European model. And what's nice to see is that both of these models are converging on the fact that through the weekend and into about Monday, likely the hurricane will be in the Florida area. So there's some convergence on that particular portion of the track. This is where it starts to diverge as we move into Tuesday and Wednesday, so it's September 12th into September 13th. You can see the European bringing that track inland while the GFS is bringing it northward. So that's the two tracks that we're following at this point. And keep in mind, every day that model changes. So it's all a matter of keeping an eye on this track and watching for any signs of convergence within those two models. Those are the two major ones that we do watch at this point. There is more confidence, though, that it's making its way toward Florida by the weekend. Meanwhile, we're watching the storm track just to our north and west. This is going to bring quite a bit of a punch as it moves into far interior sections of New England for tomorrow night, as there is a threat of severe weather. Meanwhile, though, for eastern portions of southern New England, it's actually looking pretty nice tomorrow. Mainly sunny and will stay dry for much of today and tomorrow. But you can see that storm threat just to our north and west as we move into tomorrow evening. And it's after 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, that storm threat starts to push eastward, although even the later runs are now suggesting that that track is actually going to be even slower. So mainly in the overnight hours, that's when we see for most of the area, especially east of 495, that threat of downpours pushing into the region, likely having an impact on the Wednesday morning commute. Temperatures for tonight sitting in the 60s. It's going to be a nice mild summer-like evening. Heading into tomorrow, high temperatures reaching into the mid to upper 80s with that humidity starting to build. Showers in place for Wednesday and Thursday, and because those showers are lingering for so long, there is the potential for some high water in areas. So flooding is something we'll have to watch for. But by Friday, we do start to dry out. Because of that rainfall for the middle of the work week, though, we're saying goodbye to the 80s of today and also for tomorrow and back to the 70s.